Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Okay.
That turn. All right, wrist mobility. So maybe you're here for a specific injury, or maybe you just want better performance in your wrist. I'm gearing this discussion towards extreme sports like CrossFit and gymnastics because I work with a lot of those athletes. However, this video is designed for anybody who's having issues with their wrist. So we can do things like wrist adjustments for pinching pain or to increase mobility. We can do class 4 laser therapy to help to decrease the inflammation or speed up the healing process. And we can do things like taping to help support you throughout your movements. This video is going to focus on performance rehab and things that you can do on your own at home. So active mobility versus passive mobility. I talk about these things a lot, and it's really important to differentiate because this is what dictates injury. If I stretch my wrist back into extension, this is what's considered my passive range of motion. When I let go, let's say I come up a little bit, I can control this motion. That's my active range of motion. If my active is at 45 degrees, I really shouldn't be doing things like catching in a clean or going into a handstand that requires more of a 90-degree angle. If we're forcing our bodies into that motion with a weight or our body weight, that's when we're going to get hurt. So we'll start with a self-assessment because I don't want you to get hurt doing any of the things that I'm going to show you. It's called a controlled articular rotation, or CARS for short. We're basically taking our wrist through its full active range of motion. So we're going to start with our palm extended. We're going to pretend like we have a cell phone here. We don't want that cell phone to drop off and land onto the ground. That way we don't have any elbow rotation. So we'll grab the hand right here and we'll make a fist. We're going to connect 4 motions. So we want flexion, extension, ulnar deviation, and radial deviation. The cue I like is to get really frustrated. So I'm squeezing into each of those motions to make a really big joint circle. Each time I make it around, I'm going to go a little bit further, carving into that joint circle, and we can switch directions with that. So I use this movement on an everyday basis to help keep my wrist joints healthy as well as to increase my active range of motion. If you felt a pinch or a sharp feeling into the closed angle side through any portion of that movement, it might be a good idea to get it checked out by a professional. However, if you just felt like a stretch on the open angle side, you should be clear to move on to the next movement. My main focus is on wrist extension because that's where most people get hurt, and having at least 90 degrees is a prerequisite for most CrossFit and hand balancing movements. This exercise is going to be done on the floor. So we're on our hands and knees for this, and I want you to do this with me to get it in your head. We're starting with a passive stretch. So if your passive is back here, that's fine. If you need a little bit more, you can move forward. We're not forcing ourselves into any pinches. We're just kind of staying where we feel a comfortable stretch. So we're hanging out here for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then we're gonna start to make it active. So without changing the angle of the wrist and we're keeping our elbows straight, we're gonna start to gas pedal into the floor. So if my hand was off the floor, I'd be doing this motion, but we're not actually gonna see any movement. So I like to pretend I'm pressing my fingertips into a scale that reads in percentages. So 100% is my goal, and that's my greatest, safest effort. So I want you to start to hit that spot, wherever it might be. And holding that tension for about 10 seconds, it shouldn't feel good and it shouldn't be fun. After that 10 seconds, you should feel pretty intense burn behind the forearm. And you're gonna wanna come out of that position, but don't. We're gonna keep that same angle, and we're gonna start to peel the wrist off the floor. So trying to pull back in this direction. And again, we're not gonna see any movement, but we're gonna feel a pretty intense burn right here. So again, holding that for about 10 seconds, and it really shouldn't feel good. And after 10 seconds, the tendency is again to come out of it, but don't, because now we're gonna push ourselves further into that passive stretch. And this is kind of where we can relax for about 30 seconds. And then we're gonna repeat the pressing in and pressing back out for about 3 rounds total. Okay, now I'm gonna coach you into a real-time round so you can get a sense for what it's like. So we found our end range already. We've already hung out there for 30 seconds. Now we're gonna start to push in. So before we do that, we're creating a ton of tension through our body. We're gonna start that 10-second count right now. So I'm pressing my fingertips into the ground. I'm really trying to create a dent into the earth. If my fingertips are on that scale is registering at 60%. Let's bring it up to 70, 80, all the way up to 100, your greatest, safest effort. Can't push any further. Now we're going to reverse the angle. So fingertips up towards the forearm. We're feeling that burn into the front of the forearms, and we're holding. We have 5 more seconds. Go harder than you were before. 2, 1, and relax. But instead of relaxing, we're just going to come further into that passive stretch. And now we're hanging out here for about 30 seconds, and then we're going to repeat that process. So if we make our wrists strong at end range, we're less likely to get injured. Now I know it's not the coolest exercise in the world, we're not using any weights or bands or anything fancy, but I promise you if you do this 3 times a week or before your workouts, you're gonna see a significant improvement in your wrist. Now hand balancing and CrossFit is wrist mobility training in itself, so once you get that 90 degrees, it's a great way to keep that wrist mobility. But if you're not there yet, we may need to start working regressions to make sure we're being safe. So my favorite regression, or if you need to give your wrist a break, is using parallettes. So that way you can stay in a neutral position without needing any wrist extension. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and smash that like button below. And if you want to see more videos like this weekly, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'd love to know in the comments below if you're dealing with wrist pain, what are some of the things that you're doing right now that makes it feel a little bit better?
Yeah.